Great, cool. Yeah, thanks for staying so long. It's almost the closing of this event, I guess. We have Arjun here from LiFi, a company very familiar to mine. Hart from across, we just heard him. Ossie from Wormhole and Milap from Axelar. So we have kind of everything here across the stack. It's great, like LiFi, like very much meta-level aggregation across intent network for cross-chain swaps. And then we have two messaging bridges with different models on how to facilitate that, both well-funded. So there's a lot of future and competition between the both of you, very interesting. So maybe this is, so I was complaining today about the title. I was like intense versus arbitrary messaging bridges. I was like, okay. Maybe Hart, do you mind explaining the stack real quick? Like going from how do we describe what an intent is to what comes next? It gets into a network, solver, message bridge, quickly explaining that full stack.
Okay, yeah, and also Nathan asked a question at the end of my panel too that I thought was useful and insightful here, right? Where it's like, okay, you need a way to send information between blockchains. That is a requirement and is going to be necessary, full stop, to do all sorts of things. The one thing that I've always found interesting is like, okay, when you think about connecting blockchains like connecting the internet via TCP/IP, I think that's actually false, or it's not complete. So if I want to connect TCP/IP, if I want to connect two servers, I'm sending information, and that information is unique and non-fungible when I'm sending them between chains. And so I'm sending messages and data packets, and I got to do that back and forth. And so we're saying, okay, we need to do that between blockchains. We need to send unique, non-fungible, non-homogeneous information between blockchains. That's true. But we also are sending money and sending value here. And if you're sending money and sending value, you can do other things. Like it's more like a financial network where I can front money on the destination chain because it's fungible, and then like figure out my repayment later, and like settle with like settlement instructions later. And so I think this fungibility thing makes this dichotomy more interesting, where we are always going to need general messaging at the bottom. But you can build like, I'll call it like this financial infrastructure of intents on top that have people funding money back and forth, and then settling using generalized messaging. Maybe I'll stop there and say like that's an architecture. And you can also build other types of bridges too that also use general messaging to send money back and forth. It doesn't just have to be
maybe just like to get back to the question. We all know what intent is, what the intent network is. Behind the intent network, we have solver systems. At which point does a messaging bridge come into play? Maybe one of you guys, Ossie first, and then Milap.
I think there's like there's definitely several levels there that you can tap GMP for. So for Wormhole today, we see 70% of the messages that go across chain are just token transfers. So it's just value transfer. But you do have 30% of arbitrary data, right? So it's different types of verification, just any bits and bytes that you want to send over. With the solver networks, right, there's always going to be a market. It's a burgeoning market. I want to see it eat into the 70%, like slow finality token transfer volume for pre-finality fast fills. It's going to be a burgeoning market. It's fantastic. And then at the end of the day, once everything's settling up, you've got disparate liquidity pools across different networks. You need to settle. You need to be able to send messages either quickly or that aren't latency sensitive later, high value messages. You can do these all sorts of these ones.
Anything to add, Milap?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with that. I think for solvers, like you do have to start at the end of the day, and then there's also the scenario where I think you're mentioning that solvers are only willing to take some of the risk. They won't likely, they might want to be willing to like intent execute like $1 million transfer, for example. So you still have to like use the messaging system, fall back to that at the end of the day. But yeah, I think
So we could argue like a short term, it comes simply down to mint and burn functionality of multi-chain assets that are ITS on Axelar and entities on Wormhole, right? But midterm, as solvers become more complex in the way of operations they are able to fulfill, let's say liquidations or whatsoever, at that point in time, like competitive messaging will be really a thing in order to make intent networks scalable across more use cases, right? today, do you already think that far? Are the two of you already engaging with solver systems to understand their needs and the timing in the market, which is often like the key in what we're doing?
Absolutely, yeah, right. So we see this. We work very closely with Mayan. We're big fans of Across. We want to work with the whole market where we can. We're integrating those routes already into our front ends. We're a distribution platform, right? We're a connectivity tissue at the end of the day, and a distribution framework at the end. So we want to offer those routes. Modular is the future as well for Wormhole. Modular, not monolithic, which is fantastic. And we do actually have our our own intense solution as well, which is interesting. It's unique. Hub and spoke model on Solana. It's going to be slower. It's always going to be slower than what you guys are doing. But it has.
Why?
You have to wait for Solana settlement. So you have to wait for Solana finality because we actually bridge the funds from Solana. So solvers actually keep all their liquidity on Solana only, but it means there's less slippage. And then we actually bridge the funds over. So you add a few seconds, but you can do larger transfers. And then you add in Mayan as a swap layer if you want. You can deploy NTT. And the good thing about this is that it becomes very capital efficient, right? So solvers, they don't want to work with small tokens. They're not going to front enough liquidity for these swaps, and you don't want to manage some semi-meme coin liquidity on disparate chains as a solver, really. You can just come along, give your solver on Solana 20K, and then assuming the worst case scenario there, 15-minute ETH finale, 15, 16 minutes. If you give them 20K, then theoretically, in a day, you'd be able to transfer 2 million in volume for your meme coin cross-chain. So that's the idea.
Ossie, you mentioned Mayan as another bridge that supports Intense. Hart, do you know if Mayan supports the standard you have published?
No, I don't think they do yet. Okay. I mean, they're, as I understand it, Mayan is pretty heavily involved in Solana and all that kind of stuff too, right? So, one of the questions of the audience, the standard is still an EVM standard.
Yeah, but not only they also support EVM to EVM. So, wondering if you look at a competitive product like Mayan, to a certain degree competitive, are you going there and pushing for the standard adoption as well? Are you pushing for adopting that standard as well there?
For Mayan to adopt the standard? Yes. Sure. The way I look at it is the more solvers on the same system, it's positive sum. They just can do more. Having to spin up competing solver networks just becomes inefficient and kind of annoying for the solvers themselves. So if we can kind of have everybody being like, hey, here's one standard, I think it's kind of a gift. Philipp, it's kind of interesting, right? We built Across, and we have this solver network that actually developed. We were able to develop it, and it's more decentralized than I expected. There's 30 odd people playing in it. There's some distribution, or some pretty solid distribution, at least by number of transfers. But the standard is effectively us opening that up and being like, hey, here's a solver network that anyone can use. So, from my perspective, there's a lot of projects that are yeah, we want to use that because we don't want to bootstrap our own solver network. It's kind of the way I look at it.
At LiFi, we look a lot at bridging concepts, and bridges in the early stages come to us and push for early integration to get access to larger integration in the space. Arjun, if you look at, we have almost weekly a new bridge knocking at our doors. How many bridges, what is the trend you're seeing? Do you see a strong trend towards solver network-based bridges, or what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think Across has done a great job in the last year just popularizing that trend, right? Intent-based bridges are popular. Everybody today is kind of building that design. Nobody is actually doing AMMs anymore. That's just Across. So any new bridge that comes up does Intense. And I feel so I was having a conversation with Jim and Angus today, and a part of it is also because they feel it's easier to just run one solver and two solvers.
Could you give a quick background on who Jim and Angus are?
Okay. My bad. So Angus is the lead, foundation lead for Stargate, and Jim is the founder of Catalyst. Catalyst is building an intent-based bridge. And there's a general trend towards intent-based bridges because technically you can just run one solver and start doing something similar, right? And the good thing is if there is centralization, but you can technically do it faster because you don't have to take orders from a lot of solvers, right? So there's a liveness risk, sure, but then you can do it faster and cheaper because you don't have a lot of people to keep happy.
Arjun, it's a kind of interesting analogy because like I can run a blockchain with like one miner, right? And be like, hey, here's my blockchain with one miner, aka a database, right? I will say that there is like it's a good point. I honestly think of the solver network as kind of like they're incentivized off-chain actors. They're not building blocks, but they're like filling intents. And if you get enough of them and you get enough distribution, you're like, okay, you're credibly decentralized now. That's not something that people are like talking about today, but I do think that is something that people are going to be talking about more.
I'm not saying it's a good trend. I'm just saying like it's a trend that I'm seeing, right? Like it's just feels like a easier problem to solve that you can just run one solver. And I'm probably like one of the louder voices talking about like adding more solvers to intent-based bridges, right? But it's just something that we're seeing in general. People want to build intent-based bridges because it's easier to bootstrap.
I absolutely agree. Like you see the trend, there's plenty coming along with, they just have basically they're just one solver. I'm definitely, maybe we should coin a term IAC, intense accelerationists, and just and just talk about. I'm a big fan of what Hart is pushing, and I'm just in the exact same boat. And I make the same observations as you, Arjun.
The one solver story on launching a bridge with one solver, I think Relay is going that way, and it allows them to expand super fast, be first on a new chain, even having their own inventory. That's kind of a play that allows you to. It's an interesting go-to-market strategy, like that. Let's decentralize later, and obviously users are not giving a damn about it. It's also interesting to see. I think 2 years ago they would have been ripped apart, right? And today, like no one complains. They're like, it's fast, it's cheap. Thank you.
Phil, actually, can I ask you a question? Like from LiFi's perspective, supporting like somebody like well, I won't name. Let's say there's an intent-based bridge with a single solver. Yeah. What's your take on supporting them from like LiFi's kind of aggregation perspective?
For us, we have always been operating in the very same way. Like we go for customer demand. But we are a pure B2B company. We have Jumper as a B2C interface, but it's a separate team, a separate agenda, and we treat Jumper as a customer. And we very often have conflicting priorities because like a MetaMask, a Robinhood, a Phantom, Binance have much different demands than what Jumper has. Jumper is like, we need this new L3 and we need elastic chain support today. Phantom doesn't care about that. Phantom's like, I want to have Psi, I want to have SUI. And then Binance is like, I need your API latency to go down by 500 milliseconds. Like, so we have very conflicting priorities. And that being said, we have implemented many things just because we wanted to win a certain deal, and we do what the customer demands. We have implemented, to name some names, router protocol, Synapse, bridges have been in the space forever. Router protocol has sent us tons of data on how much cheaper they are than other bridges, but it doesn't matter if I don't have a client demanding for it, so they're not implemented yet. And that's a very pure business decision, has nothing to do. We have been very opinionated around decentralization and trust minimization and all of these things back then when it was on vogue. Today we would love to, we were still touting the same things, but from what we do in our business, it's just purely what our customers demanding. And I'll give you an example on this. Like, let's say there's a new chain with Abstraction, they're building their own wallet, and we want to win that wallet as a client, and they need this, and then the first bridge that is there, and it's centralized, and they're like, we would love to implement you, but we need this bridge. They're the first ones launching on us. We're like, okay, that's what we have to do then.
A lot of these things are also like bull market and bear market things. So bear market, everybody has a lot of time. We can discuss these details. Bull market users are like, hey, there's this new chain. There might be an airdrop. I'd like to farm it.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Yeah, so some of the considerations like for Axelar, when it comes to like single solver, so for ITS, we also like provide some intent service as well. One of the interesting things for us is that the risk of having a single solver is not as as big of an issue, because even if the solver is live, your flow will automatically default to the regular bridge transfer, so you actually don't rely on it for liveness to the same degree. And then there are also scenarios where, for example, like, okay, maybe there's some meme coin who wants to like have a add their asset bridge to some chain. It's okay for like them to just work with a single solver to provide that service, versus like more popular routes where like you need some more competition for like lower fees, etc. So I think like some scenarios where like single solvers are fine, like it's not as big an issue, versus like, yeah, if you want like for the standard route, you want some more competition longer term.
Where do you think in this whole stack, and let's break it down with the players that are here on the panel. We have that application layer, no one of us. Then we have the trade abstraction layer, that's what we call LiFi. Essentially, we say, hey, no matter if you need to swap, bridge, no matter from any to any asset, you shouldn't care. That's why you use LiFi. And then down below, the next layer is definitely then intent networks. And then we have the solver layer, and then we have the tissue underneath, like the GMPs, AMBs. Where do you think will value accrual, the long, like the rough perspective we get from talking to venture capital companies, is like you either own the bottom or you own the top. Anything in between will get squeezed. No matter if you're like middleware of any kind, it's getting squeezed. You write the blocks, you connect the blocks, or you own the application at the very top and you own the user. What are your takes?
100% what you said. I was going to say top of the funnel, like user. That's where you guys play, and that's where absolutely where you guys are at. I would say even to like look into the bottom layer a bit more. The bottom layer has its own funnel where it's being squeezed. The verification layer, like, is modularizing. Like everyone's like run and verifies. You've got like ZK, you've got, like economic stake. You've got formally verified methods. Like if you want to trust some maths framework, like
Arjun, write these terms down. I've never heard them.
I'll go look at the recording when I'm back.
Okay, yeah.
Right. So you're just exactly. So you've got all this stuff. So you're being squeezed even at the bottom. Like it breaks down even further. So I still think it's at the top, and I think that's like for you guys, as you say, it's like it's the same as banks, like taking custody of the customer's digital identity, because then they can control the services. They can control the insurance service. They're controlling the order flow in a way, and there's that power in that. They can nudge services that they basically want to push people towards, and it seems to work.
Is there Hart, do you have anything to add to this?
I think I actually agree with the take generally. Like we've thought about like even in cross, like we either kind of like monetize like at kind of call it like an auctioning off intents, or we monetize at the settlement layer, not at the like solver layer. And then there you can kind of like debate a little bit about like what is the top and the bottom a little bit here. But I think the general thrust seems right from at least like a traditional business perspective. The one thing I'd add is like in crypto, it almost seems like everything keeps getting commoditized, like literally everything. L2s get commoditized, block space gets commoditized, data availability gets commoditized, like wallets get commoditized. Like we might be in a space where like every layer gets commoditized, and I don't actually kind of have a crystal ball for like 10 years from now where value accrual is going to lie here. Yeah.
What you're telling me, the token is the product, yeah?
So like
you said it.
So like the messaging bridges have a very interesting product there, right? Like they can flip the whole chart by just going to the token issuers and adding them as their clients on like an entity or an ITS, right? So like in that case, the value accrual just changes fully.
That one I agree with, but I think it's also like a parallel, kind of like a little bit of a different business model. Like if you are the asset issuer, like I almost think of you guys as having two business lines. It's like being the asset issuer through your like wrapped asset standards, and then general messaging, and the general messaging isn't required for the wrapped asset, but like they're kind of different things, right?
The thing is with those wrapped assets, and they're not even like wrapped anymore. Obviously, we have like $4 billion locked in the token bridge contract, even though we have like 55 bill like value secured on NTT since launching that. But essentially, people, it's funny because people keep calling them competing token standards, but the token contracts implement the exact same interfaces. It's a burn, it's a mint, it's a set, it's a set authority. You can transfer, you can move between them. So the standard is actually been set, and we all share the same standard. We just have like different messaging frameworks around it. So I would say even that is a commodity in itself already. I would just definitely just come back to the top and just say maybe the only thing we won't commoditize are the users, are the degens. You can't commoditize human beings.
I mean, you guys should push back on the wrapped asset terminology.
I mean, we don't love the fact that there's 4 bill locked in the token bridge, and that it's totally cool by us if people want to still issue wrap tokens or whatever. But we are making it super simple. We're doing the GUI, whatever. For the entities, and they're the same thing. So we do recommend teams go on that stuff. And it's
yeah, I mean, so one of the things with Intents, it's there are smaller projects they don't want to deal with having their native asset that they control on every chain, right? They do want to use just some service that provides that for them. So I think that application will still exist for sort of this long tail of smaller assets. And yeah, I think for the messaging bridges, there are a bunch of applications they're serving. I think I agree that it seems a lot of parts of the crypto stack are going to be commoditized. I think for good, we do want to build a decentralized protocol and service that and we don't want rent seekers to accumulate in different places. I think at the end of the day, the application, the UX that you provide to the users, that matters. Users want their problem to be solved in this most convenient way possible and the easiest way. So I think the applications have to sort of be where they compete and to attract users based on UX, rather than have locking based on some part of the sort of infrastructure layer. Yeah.
To which extent, or how do all of you look at the super app thesis, owning the full stack? I would love to start there because I'm very curious. People at the top going to go down. To which extent do you aim to go up?
Yeah, so I think, in our case, we do like to still work, with other protocols to build experiences. Our goal isn't really to build a super app for everything, because again, I think users really care about sort of the specific tasks that they want to solve, and I think applications can create those and solve those better. I don't think there's going to be a monolithic protocol that can solve all the user needs. What we do want to provide is more so this universal connectivity layer, right? That applications can more easily build on. We might create some verticals on top of that leverages it. So ITS is an example, to have this sort of token sort of issuance system that's easy to use across chains. But yeah, there are so many use cases that our goal isn't to just try to take over all of that.
Any difference from Wormhole or same?
A little bit the same, right? So it's useful to own to think about it not one whole stack, but to think about it as maybe okay, what is a particular outcome? Me as a chain, as a new chain, what do I want to do? As a protocol issuing a token, what do I want to do? I think about it what's nice is we can say, and we're modularizing so many parts of that. We have our intents layer, it's open. We have Mayan, etc. Maybe modular verification is the future. You guys have a great network. We have a great verification network as a basis, but that's again, it's monolithic, and maybe it's not the way forward for the future. So we have to think about that. But what I do like is being able to say, okay, cool, we have our own open source ZK stack for your verification or whatever, or these other modular verification we can connect to Anoma. We can connect to Aztec, any proof generating chains, be the highways between the super clusters, etc. But that right now, today, as a new chain, for example, and I want to bootstrap stablecoin liquidity on my chain, very important, I can launch an NTT USDC flavor, call it USDC-E or whatever you want. I can launch that. I can use, I can give a solver 50K of liquidity, and they can just start funding my new chain. And just, that's great, because you think about what is the key offering, and then that is a commodity too. So how can I just front run the commodity that the people are going to want and just be able to offer it at least, but then, it's not competitive, it's just volume based.
Yeah, fortunately, I have 1 minute left. I have one last question, Hart. If everyone adopts your standard, what is your mode?
I mean, again, everything gets commoditized, right? But no, like joking aside, I think like across can be the best service provider of the ERC 7683 standard. And I think my mental model is it is like the roll-up centric framework. Like there isn't one provider of roll-ups. There are multiple providers and they compete. And I think that's good and required to like make roll-ups really good.
So you see across flipping, setting the standard first, being first, building on top of that in terms of value-adding services, it becomes a SaaS play, essentially, eventually, where you have, hey, this is our analytics suite, this is why you build that intel around the standard. That is then the play you're aiming for?
Yeah, maybe it's SaaS, but it also can just be like, hey, 7683, I got to figure out how I like create this intent and like what's the right way to fill out on my presentation, what's the best way to fill out the parameters on that order ticket? Like, can we do that better? I think that's one aspect. And then the settlement layer, I think, again, it's a little bit like top and bottom, like you were saying. So we are, hey, we're going to be the best service provider here. And can we write a settlement contract that has maybe a small moat because of netting, some different things we can do to kind of like optimize costs, be really efficient with how we use general messaging to verify intents. I think there could be some value there too. And like, look, like I'm not going to lie, like, there's risk around this just being like an open system, but I also think it's the natural direction. So like, let's just embrace it.
Arjun, seeing so much in the space happening, as last word, name the 3 most interesting concepts, unique takes you have seen over the past 6 months when it comes to intents or messaging, because we are seeing more messaging competition as well with interesting new concepts. So can you name 3? And then we call it.
I mean, in general, intents, one, because like a lot of the concepts are derived from it. I feel like chain abstraction is a term today a lot because of intents. So intents, chain abstraction, and then the token standards, right? Like I feel these 3 things in general will be very important going
Can you name
forward.
3 projects? Just 3 projects in general in that space? No, I'm specifically asking for something, like we all knew across, everyone knows Wormhole, everyone knows Axelar, 3 underdogs, new players, new spins to any of that, so that we can go home with some homework.
I feel like one balance definitely is positioned nicely for some of the cool intents, resource log stuff. Anoma for like generalized intents, like that would be interesting at some point. And I feel like the other messaging bridge that's not on this panel, like Layer 0 has a clear distribution moat around their OFT standard, right? So I feel like there are a lot of things happening and a lot of new companies, new concepts coming up. So it'll be interesting like how things move up. And just as a last comment in general, because a lot of the tech stack is commoditizing, sometimes I'm more bullish Jumper than LiFi, because we have all the users on Jumper.
Fired. No, guys, thank you so much for coming here. Good discussion. Do we have time for one question? We got a roll. No questions again. Oh, there's a question. There's one though. We got to roll with one question though. I have leverage. I have the microphone.
How many the DAU of the Jumper?
How many years?
DAU of the Jumper.
Daily active I don't have, but monthly half.
Oh, MAU?
500,000 a month. Yeah. All right.